Annual Research Symposium. So I can't believe it's been a year already. It doesn't seem like that at all. It seems to have flown by. So for anyone here who I might not have met, I'm Lena Martino. I'm a consultant in public health here at Sandwell Council, and I'm also the director of our new Health Determinants Research Collaboration. So our theme for the day is co-production in research, and we've got a packed agenda for the next few hours where, as Leanne has just briefly gone through, you'll hear more about some of the work that we're doing in Sandwell, and you'll also hear from some of our partners about how they're working to make research practices and processes more inclusive of diverse communities. So before we start, I just want to go through some very quick housekeeping, or in my case, I suppose it's boat keeping. We will be recording the event, except for any children, but if you don't want to be recorded, then please do feel free to turn your camera off. We have factored in a number of breaks, but obviously if you need a comfort break at any point at all, if you need to go and make a drink or stretch your legs, please do. Please feel free to. I'll have to ask you, please, could you mute your microphone so that we don't have any interference? And if you have any questions during the presentations, could you please pop them in the chat and speakers can then address the questions at the end. There will be a feedback form at the end of the full event, so please do take a few minutes just to complete that. Let us know what you've enjoyed about the day and anything that we can do to improve for next time. We're not going to do individual introductions because there are too many of us, which is a brilliant problem to have, isn't it? But please, could you introduce yourselves briefly just by typing your name, where you're from and what you do into the chat. So thanks again, everybody, for joining today. I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. And I'm now going to hand over to Leanne, who's our DPH, to set the scene.
So good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining, like as Lena said, our second research symposium. And it's wonderful again to have so many people here, which is wonderful because we do want to embed research. And obviously we are part of that. So please, as Lena said, fill in the feedback form because we are all part of the research as well. So it's understanding how well these symposiums go and what we can do and improve for next time. So we are part of that as well. So I want to mention how proud we are to get some keynote speakers on for today. So we've got Professor Laura Sarent, we've got Dr. Andrew Divers, Hannah Akram-Mensah, and also Dr. Kate Fryer from the University of Sheffield. So we've got some really great people, not to mention everyone else that's also on the agenda for today. So thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for presenting today. It's great to see so many passionate individuals gathered, and we're all united with our shared commitment to enhancing how we approach our research, and that has to be approached through collaboration and co-production. And we're hopefully through today we'll be able to achieve the objective of providing an effective forum for us to share our research methodology and findings and exchange ideas and inspire one another. So I'd like to think that at the end of today we all walk away inspired, learning something new, advancing our knowledge, understanding research, and with also thinking about public health and thinking about improving health and well-being for all. And don't forget that this is part of a journey. So, we always like that technical word as in like it's a bit of a journey, but it is a journey together. And these days out, although they are like long days away from the office, they give us the time to reflect and think about how significant co-production is in research and how much research is really important in our community work. And we're at a time of real complex changes and challenges within our community. We don't want to mention COVID for too long, but ultimately we have changed as a community since COVID. And some of these challenges that we're facing are multi-layered. So it's COVID, it's cost of living crisis, it's changes in the environment, it's changes in the political environment. And so it's really important to involve our diverse stakeholders. So we're really happy for so many people to link from different aspects of the community so that we can link in from researchers to community members. And that importance cannot be overstated. It is so important that this reaches everybody across Sandwell, because the co-production not only enriches the research process, but also ensures that our findings are relevant, accessible, and impactful But most of all, we need this to be translated in a way that can be applied in the real world to support our communities. And I'll say that again, it needs to be research that is translated and it can be applied in the real world. And that is what the beauty is of today, of bringing the research forward. The reason that the reason being is we often see really great research but in the world that we're living in at the moment, it can be quite rigid and it can be quite difficult to see how it can be applied. And we often see some really inspiring work within the communities that we know works. It's really meaningful, but we don't often set out to measure those impacts in a way that can be translated and replicated. So these two worlds must coexist to create a real change, to show that we can make a meaningful impact, but also we can make a measurable impact at the same time, and how we show that some of the things really do work and it brings this work to the fore. So we want to explore various dimensions of co-production research through the presentations for today. I do know that they will be inspiring. They'll think about how we work within our communities, but also how the research can reflect that real world picture. We've got some amazing distinguished speakers who will share their insights and experiences. They will showcase the innovative approaches and the successful partnerships that we really need to bring to the fore to have real power in that collaboration, because those partnerships that we're setting up today and having those discussions, even just seeing each other and recognizing each other and picking out a name, that is the real power behind the collaboration of today. So I encourage everyone to engage actively throughout the day, ask questions, share your perspectives, but connect with your fellow attendees, because that is the beauty of bringing everyone together and being able to see names. And it's great that everyone's putting their name in the chat at the moment, because it's through these interactions that we can learn from one another, but also inspire new ideas, because we can look at some of the keynote speakers today of what they've done, and we can think, well, we can do that here, and that is how they've done it, and we can come up with new ideas that we can put into everyday life within Sandwell and within the wider picture. So as we delve into today's discussions, let's keep in mind on the ultimate goal, to make a tangible difference and a positive impact in our communities and beyond. Together, we can transform the landscape of research and ensure that it's not only a pursuit of knowledge, but also a pathway to change. So it's not just about knowledge, it's how we translate that into real positive change on the ground. And finally, my gratitude goes out to the organisers. So thank you, Lena, Kira, thank you, Tracy, all the work that's gone into it, and anyone else who's on the call that have supported and indirectly supported the symposium. But this symposium also couldn't happen if people didn't turn up and attend. So it's great that we've got, at the moment we're up to 52 now, 52 people that have come in. So thank you for being here today, and I wish you all a very inspiring and productive and collaborative symposium. And I'll hand back over to the agenda, but thank you for allowing me the time to join in. And I'm very excited about what's on the agenda for today.
Fantastic. So yes, I mean, firstly, just to say thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak to everybody today. When I saw the programme come out as well, and some of the other sort of fantastic speakers that you've got on today, it was, I was really interested in coming along, and just wanted to thank you for the opportunity. So I'm Andy Divers. So I'm a research fellow at Teesside University, and my incredibly long title in terms of the HDRC is I'm HDRC South Tees Community Research and Ethics Lead. And today I'm just going to be talking a little bit about co-production in research. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about some of the main things to do with co-production research. And just as a bit of an overview, we're going to start with this idea of the difference between consultation, co-production, etc. Also a little bit about researcher reflexivity. So in terms of a researcher that's going into a space where you're co-producing with other people, who are you and kind of who are you not, and how do you navigate that? Really big point when you're co-producing with anybody, but especially within the community, is do your homework. Also going to talk about a few practical hints and tips, and also some of the mistakes that we've made, and kind of how you can learn from those. And lastly, a little bit about how can we do co-production again, particularly with communities, better? Thank you. So, yeah, it may seem like a fairly obvious question to be asking, and I'm sure a lot of you will already kind of know the answer, but just in case, you know, what really is co-production? There's different types of co-production with different stakeholders, and kind of one of those things is knowledge translation. So one of the things that we really drive at when we're doing co-production research is to make sure that we go from doing research that you know, is all very interesting, all very well and good, but we really want that to translate into policy change, practice change, you know, to really make the lives of the people that we're researching for, to make their lives better. And one of the things about co-production research is that the knowledge translation element of that is incredibly important, and certainly with the research that we do, you know, making sure that it does have palpable benefits is really the main aim. We're not looking just to produce journal articles or nice looking reports. We really want to actually do research that makes the lives of people in our local area better. There's participatory action research. Again, that's usually when you will have the people that you're co-producing the research with to have a particular goal in mind, and that the research that they're doing will feed into that. So a lot of the participatory action research that we do is with voluntary sector organisations, community groups, things like that, and they'll come to us and they will say, you know, we've identified this particular issue within our community. We would like to gather some evidence. We would like to kind of have that robust evidence that is able to show kind of what this issue is, or to show that kind of something that we're doing, we think that it works, but we would really like to have that evidence in order to demonstrate that works. And that's another particular kind of co-production research that I'm a particular fan of, again, because it really seats that power and that agency within the community itself. And as I say, you know, collaborative research where you collaborate with different individuals, that, as I say, maybe practitioners, policymakers, and certainly in my case, and the part of co-production research that I'm particularly interested in is that research that is done with communities. Yeah, so some practical tips really on co-production. So one of the things in terms of co-production, I think that I've seen over the years that a trap that a lot of people potentially fall into is that they don't involve people in their co-production research early enough. So what can happen, I think, sometimes is that you will decide on a question, you will potentially even decide on a methodology, and then you will involve the people that you're wanting to co-produce with. Then you'll involve communities to get their feedback on what you've already done. What we try and do is involve people far earlier at that stage, and certainly one of the benefits of the HDRC, I think, is that we are able to maintain those conversations before we actually get to a point where we've even identified a research question. So our community research program that we have in South Tees, we have a number of community research associates that actually are responsible for working with communities and identifying those questions. We also have research drop-ins kind of once every fortnight across the two areas, so in Middlesbrough and Redcar and Cleveland, and that's open. It's in community spaces, and it's open for anybody from the community to drop in and basically have a talk to us about research, about issues that they kind of want us to look at, that they want to look at with us. But really, I think that it's important to make sure that they set the agenda as well as kind of, you know, providing feedback. So we involve communities with the research that I do right from the very beginning. So we don't do anything without community consultation. And that feeds into that idea of co-design as well as co-production. I know that's not necessarily always feasible, but certainly if that's something that you're able to do, that would certainly be, in our case, kind of what we would aim for would be the co-design as well as the co-production. Also, as well, make sure that you give true weight to the views and the knowledge of the there may be experts by lived experience. They may be people that are really knowledgeable about their community, but it's really important to make sure that you don't kind of make that tokenistic. And I think, again, there is a lot of co-production research out there these days that tends to be kind of, for want of a better phrase, the sort of cuddly bit that's bolted on at the end of a research project, and really those experts by experience should be the ones that are kind of at the center of that. And yes, your expertise as a practitioner or as an academic will be relevant, but no more relevant than the individuals that you're engaging as experts by lived or living experience. And again, check in at every stage. So check in when you're identifying the research question. Also, as well, what's quite important, if you're applying for funding, check in that the funders that you're going for are acceptable to the groups that you're working with. There may be a whole host of reasons, depending on the communities that you're working with, that they may or may not want to engage with certain funders, depending on the nature of what that funding is. So make sure that they're happy for you to go for that funding. Once you've then obviously got to the stage where you've identified funding, you've secured that, make sure that they're involved in working out some of the costings for things. So who do they want involved? How much time do they want to have them involved? And again, if you're working with academic partners or practitioners, then this sort of stuff would kind of be taken as a given. You would obviously involve those collaborative partners at those stages, but make sure again that you're not separating the community involvement and the community engagement from that. They are equal stakeholders, and they should be treated as such. And most importantly, give credit. Again, I think that one of the issues that there can be in academia, particularly, is when it gets to the time when you are writing bids, when you are writing journal articles, there seems to be a kind of a little bit of a habit of community members' names not appearing at that stage. And I certainly think that if you've done PPI work, if you've done consultation with communities, if they've helped you design that bid, if they've helped you write that bid, then absolutely they should be on there as co-applicants. And certainly one of the things that we're doing as part of all the bids that go in through the community research programme is, if any community members have been involved in helping us to prepare that bid, they're on as co-applicants. And we've already submitted a number of bids where those community members are co-applicants on that bid, the same as anybody else would be. So, who are you? I think that sometimes it can be difficult when you're going into particularly a community setting to really kind of reflect on who you are and kind of what you might represent when you're going into that space. I mean, the first thing to say is that whether you're an academic or a practitioner, if you are engaging with communities and you're wanting to do co-production with communities in particular, it may sound kind of difficult sometimes to acknowledge, but you're not the expert. The experts by lived and living experience, they're the ones that you're wanting to consult. They're the experts on the issue that you're asking about. You may have other expertise that's relevant, but you are not the expert. And quite often when I am engaging with communities, I'm not even an expert. I don't have lived or living experience of a whole range of things. And so if I'm engaging with individuals that do, I'm certain to acknowledge that I am not an expert in that space, and I think acknowledging that sometimes can really help when you're building relationships. There are certain perceptions with a lot of people about kind of what academics represent, what practitioners represent, particularly if you work for a particular university, for the local authority. There's a whole weight of kind of expectation, not always positive, around what that represents, and you kind of need to be aware of that. But certainly not positing yourself as an expert in that space can really go a long way towards building those relationships. Also, as well, kind of making sure to acknowledge as well the difference between lived experience and living experience. It's a conversation that I've had with a lot of people over the last sort of year or so, that just because that you have experienced something previously doesn't necessarily mean that you are an expert in that now. So one particular example is that I have lived experience of kind of growing up with deprivation. However, I think it would be I think it would be disrespectful to people who currently have living experience of that for me to claim that I understand fully what their life situation is and what they're going through. If somebody wanted to ask me about what it was like growing up in that kind of environment in the 80s and 90s, yes, then I would be the person to say that I know exactly what that's like, because I that was the time in which I was growing up in that situation. Obviously now I work for a university. I am not now living in those situations, and so acknowledging the difference between lived experience and living experience is really, really important, and acknowledging that people who have that experience right now have a different kind of expertise to you do, to what you do. You're not a savior. And again, communities are there with co-production research to generate their own solutions to those problems. You're not riding in on a white horse. You're not kind of providing them with anything other than kind of your expertise as it relates to the project. But it's really important to make sure that you don't kind of have that persona as you go into those spaces, and you don't assume that communities don't have the expertise and the knowledge in order to kind of help with these issues. They may not have the resources. There may be other things that you can help with, but you're not there kind of on your own to solve those problems. It's there as a collaborative effort, and you really need to kind of accentuate that. Most importantly, you're there to learn. And really, again, going in with that attitude not only helps to build relationships, but in my opinion also helps to build a far more meaningful project than kind of if you go in there thinking that you do have the answers. And lastly, be aware of what you might represent. So depending on who it is that you're wanting to engage with, things that may be something that you need to consider when you're going into those spaces are, your social class, your ethnicity. If you're from an organization that represents authority, how are you going to address that? And these power imbalances and the perceived power imbalances are something that you need to work really hard at kind of trying to dismantle, and making sure that it is a fully collaborative effort. I mean, one thing that I would say, which is a really practical tip, which I learned very early on, is if you are going into certain communities and you are from an organisation such as the university or a local authority, if you don't remember anything else, don't wear a lanyard. It sounds like a really simple thing, but for a number of communities, their experience of people going into their community spaces and engaging with them wearing a lanyard is usually to ask them about something that they're perceived to have done wrong. They're there to monitor them. They're there to do things that really aren't going to ultimately benefit them in their perception, and they usually aren't pleasant experiences. So when you go in with a lanyard on, people will spot that lanyard, and instantly they'll be put offside by the fact of what you represent. So I would say really think about also how you dress. Make sure that you're not representing that overly authoritative figure. That isn't the case with all communities, of course, but there are some communities where you really won't be thanked for going in and representing all the perceptions that they potentially have about you and the organisation that you represent. So just a little note on accessibility. So here are a couple of examples of kind of how we make sure that the research that we're doing is accessible to communities. There are lots and lots of things that may present a barrier to individuals. So it may be literacy, it may be language barriers, it may be around issues to do with neurodiversity. So we've recently started a project on creating a neurodiverse friendly wellbeing tool. And we've really had to look at the way in which we use language as part of that. There are certain phrases that we've been advised that don't really make kind of sense to some of the individuals that we're working with. And we've really had to look at the way in which we communicate. Now, obviously, we've done that in co-production, so I don't necessarily, I've prepared communications for the kind of neurodiverse individuals that we're working with. I'm not an expert on that. The individuals that we're working with are, but it's been a really interesting process to really think about the language that we use. Another couple of examples was one on the left that you can see where we actually developed a flow chart with all of the stages within the research project that we were doing, where individuals would then be able to kind of exit the process and kind of how they would do that. And we were told that a visual representation of all those different points where individuals could choose to exit the research process was something that would really benefit them. And so we put that together. Also, something that we're trying really hard with in South Tees at the moment is to make sure that we translate as much of our research material as possible into the languages of the individuals that we're trying to work with. So that in the middle there, that is a little section from an information sheet that we sent out, which is translated into Calderach. So that's something that I was able to do myself for the Roma community, but we also have other individuals as well, and we've started translating some of our research resources into Ukrainian, into Urdu, and a number of other languages as well, to make sure that we're really allowing individuals to communicate in their chosen language, because of course, you know, if somebody's communicating with you in their second, potentially even third language, there's not a level of equity there, because they're already at a disadvantage from anybody who's kind of speaking in their native language. That, you know, we may be asking people to talk about quite complex thoughts, emotions, concepts, and so to do that in a second or third language just makes it sort of more difficult and reduces that equity for individuals. As I say, there's a lot more to be said about this, and certainly if anybody wanted to continue those conversations, I'd be more than happy to do so. So yeah, other ways of ensuring equity that you really need to think about. So if you're working with communities, a lot of people, you know, it's not their job to be working with you. So you really need to think about what time you're doing that. A lot of times I do tend to be quite outspoken with a lot of the events that groups will put on. If we're doing translational research, participatory research, etc., it'll be on a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 when we're at work, and that isn't often the best time for the community. So I will often organise events evenings and weekends. That's not when I'm at work, but it's also often not when those individuals that I'm trying to engage with are at work. So if you can, and if it's possible, really look for a time that's actually going to be suitable for individuals. Venue as well. So one of the things that we resoundingly heard from the individuals that we engaged with as part of the preparation for the HDRC bid was that they didn't like coming to the university. They felt that it was a really corporate environment. They didn't feel welcome. And while it's obviously a shame that people feel like that, I personally agree. I work at the university, and sometimes it's a bit too corporate of environment for me as well. So we then moved all of our events out of university spaces and into community spaces, because that's what we were told. Provide food, provide refreshments. Again, particularly this came out around an event that we looked at with food insecurity, and the individuals that we spoke to had mentioned that in a lot of instances, because they were suffering kind of from food insecurity, those individuals, if we were holding meetings in evenings, they'd said that they hadn't had the opportunity to eat, and so when they were participating in those events, their minds were on the fact that they hadn't had anything to eat rather than anything that we were asking. So we ensured again that people were just able to access the research from a level playing field. Other participants, again, if you're working with community groups, there may be discord between certain groups of individuals, and you really need to think about that as well. You need to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, feels safe, and feels that research environment is a safe space in which they can share their thoughts. Payments, again, something that we do with HDRC South Tees is really kind of something that we've been very, very tough on. If you're going to ask for people's time, then you need to make sure that that's valued, and you need to at least offer payment. So we've had individuals that have said that they don't want that, and we've looked at other ways to remunerate them, or we've kind of donated that money, you know, for them to donate to charities or organisations, whatever it is. But we really are committed to the fact that, you know, especially if it's in work time, you're getting paid, you're at work, and so to expect people to give up their time for free for us really isn't something that we're comfortable on doing. So make sure that is something that you're able to do. And I've mentioned publications before, if people contribute, make sure they're involved. And, if and when you get something wrong, and we've done it on a number of occasions where we've thought something and that hasn't been right, the main thing is just be honest and learn. If you admit your mistakes, if you admit that you've made a mistake and where that's come from, most people will kind of embrace the opportunity to educate you and to tell you how you can do things better, and be really open to that. And if you've made a mistake, don't try and hide it, don't try and minimize it, just be honest. So just before I move on to the next slides, how long have I got left? I'm aware that I've probably gone on quite a bit already.
Sorry. No, still good for time. I think you've still got a few minutes left. So
Fantastic. Thank you, Lena.
Yeah, no worries.
Brilliant. So one of the issues that I have at the moment is there are still some areas that are often considered off limits to co-production. I think the two main areas are around governance and data, as I mentioned, but also ethics. I think that certainly with universities, a lot of these things are still considered to be something that we do in-house, and that it's not something that we would involve individuals in kind of the spirit of co-production. And the question that I want to ask is why. I'm not entirely certain why we can't involve communities within these processes, and hopefully over the next couple of slides I'll kind of show why that's the case. So why should we co-produce ethics, for a start? So I mean, the first thing is this idea, slightly fancily titled, of prefatory rubric, but essentially the thought is that as an individual with a certain as an academic disciplinary, or from a practitioner, what area you work in, as a person that is shaped by a certain kind of professional background, you will over time only start to see things, or predominantly start to see things, within the framework of that sort of production of you as a professional. The problem with that is that it can often lead to bias, especially I think when we're talking about ethics. So when we're looking at whether or not a practice is research practice is acceptable, then what we're often saying is that research practice A is acceptable in the context of B. And if we're with people that are from the same disciplinary background as us, they tend to agree with us because we have the same training, we have the same kind of broad outlook on those things. Now, the problem with these biases is that they're often unconscious, and at the very least, they're unacknowledged. And certainly in terms of ethics and in terms of what we consider to be permissible and not permissible within research, these biases really matter. The way that you think that things are, the context that you apply, the lenses that you apply when you're looking to whether or not something is acceptable, they really matter in terms of the outcomes that you get from that. Now, if we don't confront, or at very least acknowledge, these biases, we're often left with kind of these ethical coteries, which is just a fancy way of saying that we kind of have groups of like-minded people making similar decisions about similar things, and because we're all of the same mind, kind of dissent or questions don't arise, and we think that we're doing a great job, but actually we're just doing a job that everybody agrees with, which isn't necessarily the same thing. Next slide, thank you. Now, I think for those of you that have an interest in ethics, and apologies for those of you that don't, I think the primary bias that we're often under in terms of ethics, certainly formal ethics, is that we're guided by a consequentialist worldview when we're conducting research. So the idea that the consequences of our actions justify whether or not those are kind of ethically permissible or not. And I think there's a lot of examples where we look at ideal utilitarianism as one example. So that's where not only pleasure, but truth, beauty, and knowledge are things that we should aim for. And often when we're filling out research approval forms, and anybody that's done that, you will know that quite often what you're asked to do is balance risk against potential benefit, and you minimize the risk and you try and maximize the benefit. That is brute utilitarianism, and there's lots and lots of examples where we use that. So medical trials, certainly we ask people to often take on an extreme amount of risk, and the argument of why that's acceptable is often that we will discover a cure or discover a treatment for something which will benefit more people than the potential risk that we might be subjecting people to. Next slide, please. Now, the danger isn't that we're guided by those principles necessarily. I'm not here to give utilitarianism a bashing here. I definitely do it elsewhere. But you know, the idea is that, you know, when we claim that research is ethical, we're saying a very certain set of things, especially to the community members. If we're doing research with communities that are wanting to engage with us, we are telling them that this research is ethical, and that says a very specific thing. However, I think when we're claiming that research is ethical, we're only talking about what is considered ethical under a set of very, very specific circumstances. So certainly, when we're talking about research being ethical to communities, what we're actually saying is we've looked at this and we think that there is an acceptable amount of risk compared to the amount of perceived reward that we think is going to come from this research project. Now, it may sound like that's just semantics, but when you're communicating with people, if you say this research is ethical, that says a very, very different thing to them than it is of acceptable risk. And the idea about being informed about the research that you do, the research participants that choose or choose not to be part of that research, informed consent we know is incredibly important. But I would argue that you would not necessarily you would not necessarily agree to one set of things, you know, kind of if you would agree to another. And I think there's potentially other legitimate bases for judging research: deontology, contractualism, and I'm really interested in the notion of lay ethicists, of using community members as ethicists. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I've, as I say, a bit of a whistle-stop tour of a few things there. I hope that you found some of that sort of practically useful, some of it interesting. If anybody does want to have a conversation about ethics at any point, yeah, be my guest. But thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Lena. And thanks very much to Andrew for a really interesting and informative presentation. I really enjoyed it. As Lena said, my name's Tracy Jobber, and today we're going to be taking a look at the research Sandwell has been undertaking in terms of place efficiency. For background and context, I'll be sharing what place efficiency is and why we've decided to undertake this process in Sandwell. If you could do the next slide, please, Kira. I'm going to talk you through what we've achieved so far and what our next steps are towards completing the research. And there will be an opportunity at the end to ask any questions, and I'll display my details. So if you want to know more about the research, you can contact me later on. Okay, so we're going to be looking at what is place efficiency, why conduct it in Sandwell, who and how and people are involved, how we managed it, and next steps. So what is place efficiency? Well, to be concise, I'm going to abbreviate to PSA where I can during the presentation. So place efficiency is about making sure children have enough time, space and permission to play as an essential part of their everyday lives. But why is that important? Well, we know that play and well-being are interrelated, and children tell us that playing is having fun, feeling happy, being with family, and it makes them and other people around them feel positive. Children have a strong instinct to play and seek opportunities to do so anywhere and everywhere that they can. Being able to do so is also shaped by their environments and those people within those environments, and having insufficient opportunities to play is detrimental to children's well-being, and which includes concerns about increased rates in childhood obesity and poor mental health. So PSA is a robust piece of research that supports children's informed participation and ensures their opinions are given at least equal weight to that of adults. An emphasis is placed on the information provided by children. The research recognises that children are the experts and can give both nuanced and detailed accounts of their play experiences, and that these insights into children's lived and living experiences can help us rethink how we respond to children and how things might be done differently. This place efficiency research can also be used to establish and evidence key performance indicators associated with creating more child-friendly environments. Why place efficiency? Well, place efficiency research enables the development of evidence-based, strategic and sustainable action plans aimed at cultivating more favourable conditions for play. This approach ensures efficient and effective targeted use of resources and encourages partnership working. Place efficiency is a process that ensures adults pay greater attention to how their decisions and actions constrain or support children's time, space and permission for play. This is an ongoing process of research and action to assess, improve and protect opportunities for play. An initial assessment stage explores what is working for who, where and why at both a neighbourhood and organisational level. And this helps establish the factors that constrain play and the assets that support it. The detail of the assessment findings is then used to develop evidence-based targeted responses. And these responses may include changes to policy and practice. When children talk to us about play, they tell us so much more. They tell us about their lives, their environments, their communities, and their ecosystems in which they exist. Place efficiency is a legal duty in Wales and Scotland, and the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child recommends governmental support for children's play should be based on the principle of sufficiency. Outside of Wales and Scotland, there are other examples in England and Ireland, such as Leeds and Dublin, that have adopted place efficiency as an organising principle for the development of their child-friendly cities and communities. In all such cases, hyperlocal research with children has been a catalyst for change across multiple levels of policy and practice. Importantly, place efficiency provides a mechanism for Sandwell MBC to deliver on its child-friendly intentions by orientating their ways of working towards children's agenda of playing. Evidence and data from the research will inform the discovery stage of Sandwell's child-friendly programme and the journey ahead. And place efficiency also contributes towards Sandwell's ambitions of the best start in life for young children and young people and strong and resilient communities. We'll have the next slide, please, Kira. So, how and who has been involved in the research? Sandwell MBC partnered with an organisation called Ludicology, who have extensive experience in supporting local authorities in conducting place efficiency assessments. And they've provided the theoretical and ethical framework, along with training, research tools and project development. And Ben Twiley from Ludicology will be joining us this afternoon on the panel to take any further questions about their work with Sandwell and other local authorities. Their support has enabled members of the implementation team, whose members' work is not necessarily based with working with children or research, to be able to work effectively with children to collect the data, to conduct data analysis and to code the data to create narratives around each of the case study research areas. This means that more officers at Sandwell now have the experience and skills to conduct more of this type of evidence-based research. The implementation team have been recruited from a diverse range of departments from across the council, each bringing their own knowledge, experience from their relevant departments to look at what we do through the lens of play. The team's highly motivated and engaged in the process, and their commitment to the research has been one of the highlights of the ongoing project. Next slide, please, Kira. So how have we managed the process so far? So phase 1 started in January of this year with the recruitment of the implementation team and the identifying of cross-directorate partners. We started with a desktop exercise of conducting an online satisfaction survey with Year 5 and Year 9 students. We managed to achieve a 34% response rate to the online survey, which gives us a large enough sample size to ensure that the data collected is robust and accurate to within 99%. So we are sure that if we'd asked every children and every child had responded, we'd get the same answers. During this time, we also conducted SWOT analysis of cross-directorate partners to see how far they support children's opportunity for play, identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Phase 2 saw the face-to-face research in the state case study communities. From the data from the online surveys, we were able to input to a program called Power BI. And Power BI allows us to look at the different questions within the survey and interact with them in a more flexible way so that we can ask more questions. The online data allowed us to identify schools where children had reported high, medium or low levels of satisfaction with their opportunities for play. And once these were identified, we were able to liaise with the relevant schools to arrange workshops to work with Year 5 and Year 9 students. These workshops were designed to help us uncover the factors that affect levels of satisfaction in each location. We also arranged research workshops with children with protected characteristics, which included children with special educational needs and children who identified as transgender, to discover how the experience of these children differed from the cohorts that we'd already researched with. It's our intention to work with care-experienced young children, young carers and refugee and asylum seekers in subsequent assessments, or as standalone pieces of research once the assessment's been completed. To gain further insights, we also conducted spatial audits of the case study areas to understand the local environmental assets and geographical area within a half-mile radius of each case study community. From that, we were able to produce pen portraits to contextualise the case study areas with information, using information based on socio-economic factors, historical information and local intelligence. We're currently analysing the data we've collected in order to draw conclusions in each case study area across the borough. And these conclusions will be used to create narratives from what the data tells us and identify any emerging themes. We also conducted 3 knowledge transfer sessions with senior officers across the local authority. These sessions were rooted in a systems thinking approach and designed to develop partnership working and a collaborative approach to upholding children's right to play. Participants worked together to develop a shared appreciation of children's play and the conditions that support playing, both at a neighbourhood and organisational level. The aim was to ensure, as a local authority, we are best placed to respond to the findings of localised research into children's opportunities for play. Phase 3 are our next steps, which are happening between October and February, where we will create written accounts of the findings from phase 1 and 2 and present these findings to the Child Friendly Officers Steering Group and other key stakeholders to gain feedback and input. The Child Friendly Steering Group is providing governance for the place efficiency assessment. We will conduct semi-structured interview with policy leads to explore the implications of the finding from the research, and we will analyse data from these interviews to add to the assessment findings and explore what can be reasonably achieved in the current financial landscape and to establish what challenges and barriers might exist. February to April 25, this stage includes completing the place efficiency pro forma and writing up the research findings. We're going to produce a SWOT analysis of the implication across professional domains and identifying strategic priorities and recommending actions. Next slide, please, Kira. So to summarise the outputs from the work, it'll be the production of a full place efficiency assessment report, identifying current levels of satisfactions, strategic priorities, strengths and weaknesses of organisational systems and recommended areas for improvement, and a strategic cross-departmental action plan, making the best use of human and financial resources that we've got available. Next slide, please, Kira. So place efficiency is an ongoing process. When conducting research of this nature, we're often presented with more questions than we started out with, which is why further research and developmental work is imperative. The assessment is really only the beginning of the journey of discovery. I'd like to let you know that the data from the assessment will be available to any other officers within the local authority who wish to conduct research in a related field. I wonder if anybody has any questions at this point that I'm happy to answer now.
We have a question from
Morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. First of all, I'm so glad that I'm here. It's such interesting things that you're all talking about. But just picking up on this presentation, I do anticipate that I'm probably one of the oldest on this platform. And I come from an era where we used to play out all day. Playing out formed my conflict resolution skills. It helped me to count. It allowed me to learn how to be patient or not, allowed me to win an argument or not. All sorts of skills I learned playing out with friends. And I'm quite interested in how play seems to have changed over the generations. And a good example of that is I see little children in their pushchairs with their little digital play mat, or I recognise that young people tend to do a lot of play isolated in their bedrooms. And I just wondered what your view was with regards to that.
No, thank you for the question, Councillor. It's really, really interesting. I said in the presentation that children will find will play anywhere and everywhere where conditions allow, which is why the spatial audit and the pen portraits of the case study communities are so important, because children not only need the time and space to play, but they also need the permission to do so. And that is influenced greatly by their environment, and not only their environment, but the people within those environments. So part of the research is looking at children's mobility, how often they play out, are they allowed to play out, how far they're allowed to go when they do play out independently. And what the data from the research will enable us to look at is how many children are doing that and how many children are not doing that. How many children are navigating their community independently, and how many children are being taken to places to play by an adult, either in a car or on public transport. So there's going to be, this was a very quick whistle-stop tour of what play sufficiency has been doing, but the workshops have enabled us to explore those factors. We do know that digital play does form part of children's repertoire for playing, but it's not as prevalent as I may have assumed it might have been. Okay. And the data coming out of that saying, yes, they do enjoy connecting with each other via digital play, but it's not the only thing that they do. They do enjoy being outdoors as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm Nisha Patel and I manage the SHAPE programme for Sandwell, which is a Child's Voice initiative. Just a bit of an introduction into SHAPE. So it stands for the 5 Every Child Matter outcomes of staying safe, being healthy, enjoying and achieving, making a positive contribution and economic wellbeing. And the vision for the programme is where every child's voice matters in Sandwell. So why is the programme so different? So SHAPE is very unique. No other local authority, as far as we know, has a dedicated Child's Voice programme like this. And it also, now that we've got it, will help towards reaching our child-friendly initiative journey as well. So in the last 10 years, the programme has been a huge success in engaging children and young people in a variety of innovative ways, encouraging young people's voices to be heard through its own youth forum, as well as many other consultation events. The essence of the programme is that it's young people led, and not only do we listen to their voices, but we act on what they say and deliver. And Dr. Andrew Diver's presentation today clearly stated a lot of what we do, that they are the experts, and children can be experts as well and have the knowledge too, and we should be learning from them, and this is very much what we aim to do through the programme. There are a variety of different engagement methods for active participation, which involve the SHAPE survey, of which I'll be sharing the 2024 highlights today. Shape Our Future are annual conferences for primary and secondary schools, and the Borough-wide SHAPE Forum consists of 30 active members who attend on a bi-weekly basis. Our takeover challenges are where young people can take over board meetings. Make Your Mark is a national ballot where young people can vote on topics to be discussed at the House of Commons. And our youth elections take place to elect 2 members of Youth Parliament and 2 youth commissioners. The Anti-Bullying Roadshow and Safeguarding Transition Days are visits to schools that we make to talk about issues such as bullying and online safety. We do also have other forms of participation, which include events for young people like our annual Shape Your Talent show and a large community festival showcasing all the services we offer in Sandwell that's held at Sandwell Valley to young people and their families. Additionally, we have the Just Youth website, which is an information hub for young people, as well as associated social media channels. So today, like I said, the main aim of this presentation is to present some of our key highlights from our recent SHAPE survey, which took place in 2024. So the surveys have been taking place since 2014, and they change from being every 2 years to becoming an annual survey to assist with the council's business planning process. And all the survey results from 2014 onwards can be found on the link on this slide. And the 2024 report will be completed by the end of November. So the SHAPE survey is an annual online survey which goes out to schools for young people to complete. So in terms of the demographics, the survey had the highest number of respondents to date so far, with 2,751 in total, which is a 141.5% increase from 2023. In primary schools, year 5 and 6 can take part, and 39% of primary schools in Sandwell took part in the survey, with 12.4% of the total population of that age range responding. 45.2% of secondary and college students took part, with 5.7% of the total population of this group, this age group. Please note that all the schools also include special schools as well. So in terms of other demographic information, with gender, there was nearly an equal split of males and females taking part in the survey. In terms of ethnicity, white young people was the highest, followed by the second number of responses came from Asian young people. In terms of ethnicity, this very closely matches to the JSNA ethnicity numbers for Sandwell, which shows that the survey has a really good representation. In terms of religion, so 30% of both primary and secondary school age children do not associate themselves with a religion, which is quite an interesting fact. When we looked at the respondents by town, so there's a good representation from all towns with primary. Although Wednesbury dominated the responses from secondary, because there was a particular school that responded the most, other towns were represented as well, even though it may have been smaller percentages. In terms of physical or learning disabilities, so 14% of primary and 6% of secondary had physical and learning disabilities. When secondary pupils were asked about how their disabilities affected their daily lives, over 50% stated that it affected their daily lives and limited day-to-day activities. with 39% claiming they got enough support from health services, but a quarter felt they didn't get the support they needed from them. A question that we've been asking for the last 10-year duration in order to get some baseline data is what top issues affect young people in today's society. Generally, young people at secondary age feel schoolwork and exams are an issue for young people today, followed by a number of crime-related issues. A few of the reasons from young people about their choices are because there have been a lot of crimes involving young children. Another quote was that vaping is very common among teenagers and many of them start gangs. Others have trouble being accepted because of their appearance or their beliefs. This year, we asked the additional question. It was included to understand whether the issues that are being chosen are a perception or whether the choices are based on personal experience. When we asked them about their personal issues, many felt they didn't have an issue in their personal life, and those that did have issues were relating to schoolwork, exams, or bullying. Crime didn't feature as a personal issue, which means that their perception of what other people are facing is different to their own personal experiences. So this question, as I said, has been going over the last few years, well, over the 10-year period, and has generated very similar responses throughout. In latter years, with the increase in substances, drugs and substance abuse was broken down into drugs, smoking, alcohol, and vaping. Highlighted in green there is 2020, which was during the pandemic, which was the only year where there was a difference, really. And this related more to personal issues such as physical appearance and bullying being the main issues incurred during that period. So, as we've mentioned, bullying is one issue that has arisen time and time again. And over 25% of both primary and secondary age pupils have been bullied in the last 4 weeks. This amounts to over 600 children and young people this year. Comparing this to 2015, the figures increased particularly for the secondary age group. The reasons why victims are being targeted was predominantly for their appearance. When looking at substance abuse, it's another issue that was identified by the young people, and over the years, these have changed from the increased use of drugs to now vaping. The table shows a percentage of young people who have used substances, with alcohol and vaping being the substances which are the ones that have been tried the most. Although the survey is anonymous, it must be considered that not all young people may want to disclose this information. Those that had used a vape were asked the reason why, and the 3 top reasons were to make them feel better, they like flavours, and their friends vape. In terms of non-attendance, 77.9% of young people in education had time off school. For both age groups, the top reason, as you would imagine, was for short-term illnesses. The second reason for the primary age group was because they went on holiday in term time, and the second reason for secondary was due to their own mental health and anxiety. There are a number of other reasons as well, including bullying, which must be noted is not actually a reason that schools can record, as is not specified by DfE. Other reasons included are religious celebrations such as Eid and long-term health conditions. As mental health is often featured throughout survey responses, young people were asked about the top things that would improve their mental health and well-being. Both age groups feel they want someone to talk to if they had a problem and want to be supported with their schoolwork, exams and future, from making their move to secondary school being made easier to what happens after their education. Family support is also important to them. For the secondary age, they want more places to hang out with their friends. Most worries are dealt with by young people alone, and the top 2 answers in this question reflect this, which are doing something to take my mind off it if they had some worries, or to think about it on my own. Although there is much awareness of support services that are available to young people, such as drugs and alcohol education provided by DECA or Sandwell's youth services, it's difficult to know whether these are actually being utilised as they should be, especially if most young people identified their parents or friends would be the first people they would talk to rather than external services. So we asked a question around electronic devices, as these, as we know, are taking over the lives of our young people. And hence the next questions are all around social media and device usage. So over 75% of primary and secondary age children either own or have access to a mobile phone, tablet, or iPad, games console, and a computer or laptop, with 53.9% of primary having access to a smart speaker and 65.4% of the secondary age. Secondary age pupils use their mobile phone for gaming the most, followed by games console, and primary it was the other way around. If you look at Ofcom's Children and Parents Media Use and Attitude Report 2024, this also backs up the evidence that smartphones and tablet usage has increased over time and are utilised to go online. There are a number of social media channels which can be utilised by young people. Interestingly, no matter what the age, for both age groups, is the same channel in terms of usage and popularity. But YouTube is the app that is being used the most, with over 95% of usage, with WhatsApp utilised by 70% and above. Numbers for TikTok show that 50% of primary school children use this app compared to 79% of secondary, and numbers for Snapchat show that 44% of primary children use this app compared to 76.7% for secondary. So for all ages, the channels in order of popularity are YouTube, WhatsApp, TikTok, and Snapchat. With social media also comes the risks which the young people of all age groups are aware of due to the education that they already have in online safety, but they still experience these issues. For both age groups, cyberbullying and racist comments are the ones that they experience most online. The young people in the survey are asked about things that would make their area a better place. And since 2015, the top two responses have always remained the same, of cleaner and less litter and safer area or less crime. More or better shops and safer roads also feature in the top three over the years. This correlates to the issues that young people would solve if they were in charge of the council, littering being the largest with cleaner areas, and then solving crime issues such as knife crime, gangs, and substance abuse like drugs. As safety comes up as the issue for young people, they are asked whether they feel safe in different contexts. They are most safe in the home and in school, and they feel least safe on public transport. From 2015, the feeling of being safe has reduced for all of these areas. Over the last 2 years, the young people have also been asked whether they feel safe in parks and in their homes. Parks like public transport appears to be the place where they feel least safe in. In 2015, 67.2% of primary age and 57% of secondary age children stated they would stay in Sandwell. The figures have decreased and more young people are now unsure. There was only 74 responses to the second part of the question, which came from those who did not want to stay in Sandwell. They stated lots of interesting job opportunities would help them stay here. Other answers were different, with a focus on safety, good culture and family relationships, compared to last year, which stated brilliant leisure facilities and a university. So also linked to the survey, I thought I would include the Make Your Mark national ballot responses in this presentation as well. Make Your Mark is a ballot of 10 topics which nationally all 11 to 18-year-olds can vote for, and the top two across the country are debated in the House of Commons. The results correlate very closely with the SHAPE survey results, and in 2024 we had an overwhelming response of 10,632 votes in Sandwell for the Make Your Mark results, which results in 27.5% of the total population of 11 to 18-year-olds in Sandwell taking part, and we were the second highest in the West Midlands. So our top responses were crime and safety, rights, equalities and democracy, and education and learning. So you can see how not just the survey, but also other consultation methods that we do can come together really nicely to present similar sort of topic areas. So in summary, schoolwork, exams, crime, bullying and mental health and wellbeing support are all issues which are important to young people. Although we have support services, are they being utilised or valued? And when young people want to talk to someone they know or feel comfortable with, so they prefer talking to a trusted adult. Over 75% of young people own or access at least one smart device, and with this comes both benefits and risk. Video channels like YouTube and TikTok remain popular. Sandwell could be made a better place if not only issues like crime were tackled, but if Sandwell was made a cleaner place as well. So thank you for listening, and if there are any questions, then I'm happy to take those as well.
I've just got some time to talk to you about our new, as I've already mentioned previously, we have a new health determinants research collaboration, Better Research for Better Health, which started on the 1st of January. And I'm just going to talk to you very briefly about that, with a particular focus on the community engagement elements, but just firstly to give you a bit of an oversight of the programme.
Lena, you've gone on to mute.
Yeah, okay. It's because I tried to use enter to change the instead of my mouse. I keep doing this. Thank you. Okay, so just to give a very brief overview, HDRCs are programmes that are funded by the National Institute for Health Research, or the NHR, Public Health Research Programme, and it's up to £5 million over 5 years to enable local authorities to become more research active. And the purpose of HDRCs is to support councils to be more evidence informed in how we make our decisions to improve the wider determinants of health. And they're place-based partnerships that involve local universities, local councils, voluntary community sector organisations, NHS and other key partners. There is a national HDRC network. In fact, you heard from HDRC South Tees earlier. So there were 13 established on the 1st of January 2022 through the first wave of funding, and that included South Tees and Coventry, who are also represented here today. There were 11 new HDRCs, including us, on the 1st of January 2024, and that was in the second wave of funding. So we went through a competitive bidding process, which I know many of you were involved in developing that. And we were successful in the second funding wave. And there have been a further 6 that have been awarded development funding for a year so that they become a full HDRC in January 2025. So as of 2025, we'll have 30 HDRCs across the UK. There is a very short video by the NHR which explains a bit about health determinants research collaborations, and I'm just going to play that. It's just a few minutes long, but it will just give you a bit of a plain English overview of what those are and what they do. Sorry. Oh.
I think, Lena, you have to share the sound.
Sorry?
There's no audio.
There's no audio. Oh,
No.
I'm not sure how to resolve that. I'm really sorry. I thought there was audio because I can hear it.
So when you go to
okay.
share, there's a button at the top. So click on share, and then on the top right, it says include sound. So you unshare, reshare, and
Unshare.
click the include sound button at the top
Oh,
right.
thank you so much. That's learned something new every day. Thank you. Right, I will try that again.
Capacity and
Yeah, we can hear that now.
Fabulous. Thank you.
local government required dedicated investment. That was the thinking behind the HDRCs.
Certainly since COVID times, we've really recognised that a healthy life expectancy isn't quite where it was.
Lambeth is this amazing, diverse, vibrant community in which people of hugely different backgrounds and heritages all live and work side by side.
Tower Hamlets is an amazing borough. It's got such a diverse set of communities and a diverse set of challenges that goes with that. Alongside that, we also have an amazingly diverse set of opportunities. We've got really engaged voluntary sector organisations and community groups that really want to get involved.
Over many centuries, there has been poorer health in the borough, and that's linked to poverty, housing conditions, environmental issues.
Because of the oil and gas industry, it's been viewed as a city that's pretty affluent, but that affluence was never felt equally in the city. Fundamentally, what we're aiming for over the period of the award is a significant change within the local authority and its partners around research.
Local authorities have the key role in shaping place. As from a strategic level, there's a wide disparity in terms of life expectancy. The most deprived areas have females who live around 2/3 of their life in general good health, whereas in the least deprived areas that was 4/5. So there is again a huge disparity in living well, never mind life expectancy. So at its most fundamental, research is crucial to understanding not only what is happening, but what would make things better.
So what makes the HDRC different and special? There's a real buzz around the work that the HDRC is doing so that we can really think about the wider determinants of health, the building blocks of health.
The great thing about being part of this new programme is the enthusiasm that people bring to it. We've got fantastic commitment from 3 different universities and from the voluntary sector that all really want to make this work.
We've got a full team recruited. We are establishing all the sorts of platforms we need to do this well, so that's governance, ethics, the way we handle data.
The priority is to make us a place that attracts research. In 5 years' time, I think where we want us to be is that we use evidence and research in our decision making.
And we recognise that it will take some time, but we do really want to work with local people and build some really trusted relationships.
Well, I just think it's going to be an amazingly exciting partnership between the council, the community and academics.
The HDRCs are a catalyst. Local government say to us that is a game changer for them. It's allowed them to build up the people and the capacity to really start to have dedicated research.
Okay, and I'm sure that we could probably all unpick sort of I will invariably have technology issues. Right, so yes, I'm sure that many of us would have noted from that video was actually, as much as they talk about communities and community representation, that video did not include anybody speaking on behalf of their communities or from the local communities, which I find quite interesting in itself, but that's again something we could probably talk about at length. So thinking about why we needed a HDRC in Sandwell. So we initially put a bid in for the first wave where we weren't successful, and we built on that to make a stronger bid, which ultimately was successful. And I think one of the key things that we did differently, we actually worked with our voluntary sector partners earlier to actually develop the bid in its infancy, which in hindsight, we did not do as well in the previous round. So Sandwell, as you know, is the 12th most deprived local authority in England. Life expectancy is 2 or 3 years shorter than the England average, and in the most deprived wards, that gap can increase to up to 8 years. We've got some of the poorest air quality outside London. We've been hit hard by the pandemic, by austerity policies, and by climate change, which always hit the most deprived areas the most. But we also have a number of strengths. So we have a super diverse population with strong community assets, and Sandwell is a place of very rich industrial heritage. And we also have, within the public health team and wider council, a lot of existing relationships and partnerships, including with our voluntary sector and our faith sector, which we really managed to build on during the pandemic. And our HDRC bid was very much focused on the stronger Sandwell principles. So the idea is doing local things for local people and building on those community assets and making sure that nobody is left behind, but ultimately doing things with people rather than doing them to people. So thinking about our HDRC and what we ultimately aim to achieve, we want to transform the culture and the infrastructure across the council, either with the work that we do internally and with our external partners, so that everything we do is informed by evidence, robustly evaluated, and also reflects the needs and the values of our diverse local communities. We've aligned it to our Levelling Up programme to address the wider determinants of health and to look at tackling systemic disadvantage in the borough. And it aligns to our vision of having a thriving, optimistic and resilient community. So to get that buy-in from across the council, it was really important that we demonstrated how does this align to what we're all trying to achieve. So what we were trying to do was move it out of the realm of, this is public health's job, and more, actually, this is all everybody's business. So the HDRC is a collaboration between the council, our main academic partner, the University of Birmingham, and the voluntary sector, who's represented by the two umbrella organisations, Sandwell Council of Voluntary Organisations and Sandwell Consortium. And we'll also be working with wider partners and stakeholders across the borough and the region, which include the University of Wolverhampton, Keele University, and we have Paul here from Keele, Coventry HDRC, OHID and UKHSA, amongst others. So it's not an exhaustive list by any means. And we have 4 main objectives from this work. One is to strengthen research and development capacity, resources and infrastructure. And secondly, to embed a strong research culture for evidence-informed decision-making. So those are the very internally focused work streams. Those 2 are looking at changing the culture and the infrastructure internally. And then externally, it's about developing those robust systems and partnerships for culture and knowledge exchange and creating a community-led research culture, which is what we're going to focus on more today. And our work streams reflect those objectives. So the first 2 are around building that capacity and infrastructure and embedding a research culture and evidence-informed practice by training and developing our workforce, putting in place the structure and the support and the tools that people need to be able to do that, and also the structures and the processes for being able to integrate evidence into decision making. We are not looking to become a university. What we're looking to do is to make sure that we bring that balance of academic rigour into everything that we do, so that we're using good quality evidence and we are informed by local intelligence, but also we want to be pragmatic. And it goes back to Leanne's introduction at the beginning, talking about doing things that are going to be really useful on the ground. And a big part of that is the externally facing work streams. Firstly, strengthening our systems and partnerships through our academic collaborations and our wider system partnerships, thinking about how we share information and how we develop research together, and also how we involve our local communities from the start. So through expanding existing structures that we have in place. So we've heard from Nisha, for example, about the SHAPE Forum. We have a number of other avenues for public engagement. So, for example, our faith sector network, representation on our health and wellbeing board. We are looking to have lay representation on our HDRC board too. So we are going to recruit lay representatives. And there are a number of other consultation, engagement and co-production processes throughout the council that we can then build on to make sure that there is that participation and representation in research. And we're going to do that. I mean, this is quite a busy slide. I'm not going to talk about this in detail, but what this shows is that if we put in certain, so if we invest certain sort of resources and activities into making these objectives happen, we should achieve particular outputs which will lead to the outcomes that we're interested in, and over time will have longer term impacts. So focusing on the bottom one, the community participation work stream, and there's three main things that we'll be focusing on there. One is about public engagement. So how are we going to enable community-driven wider determinants research? And we really want to make sure that people have the skills and the knowledge to be able to be involved. Research priorities and partnerships. So we have a resident survey currently that goes out to all the residents in Sandwell. So there's a lot of existing communication and engagement that's going on that's informing some of the direction of what we're doing, but there's a lot, we recognise that we have a lot of work to do in terms of involving our local communities in identifying what our research priorities are. And again, it goes back to Andy's fabulous presentation. You know, we could decide our research priorities based on what we already have, but actually we need to think about the context, and we need to think about, okay, what do we need to be taking to people now, and actually building some of those ideas from scratch. Communication and dissemination. So we have the Sandwell Trends website, which is which showcases all of our local data and intelligence. We're in the process of developing a communications plan and developing networking and learning events, which I'll say a bit more about at a moment. And ultimately, what we want to achieve from that is to have diverse involvement in research and an increased understanding of research and evidence-based decision-making in communities, as well as having more increased and more diverse community involvement in the decision-making process. And this should, ultimately contribute to having, to reducing inequalities through actually having greater representation, and not having that sort of systemic bias at that very early stage, which we've talked about, where ultimately, if we are setting all of the questions, then we're not actually, then we're only getting the answers that we are expecting. So tell you a little bit about the team. We have now a full team. So what we've been doing since January is we have been recruiting our HDRC core team. So, I won't go through all of those there, but we have Elaine, who is our programme manager, supported by Ricky, our coordinator. We have 4 project managers and 4 project officers, so 2 full-time people per work stream who are working with all of our partners to get that moving. We will be recruiting 2 embedded researchers later next year, and also funding a PhD studentship who's going to focus on evaluation. And again, I'm not going to go through this one in detail, but this is just to show you where that core team sits in context. So that highlighted yellow is myself and the core team, and you'll see that there are links into a number of existing structures, both within the council and externally with our collaborators and as part of wider networks. And this again is by no means exhaustive. This is just to give a flavour of how much bigger this is than just that, a very excellent and hard-working core team. So in terms of where we are so far, so we have our core team in post, which I'm absolutely delighted to have been able to recruit an excellent team. We have draft terms of reference for all our strategic boards and key meetings, which are being reviewed as those meetings happen. We have already that the steering group and board have already been convened and met, and the partnership agreements are in the process of being reviewed by our legal team. We have also submitted to NIHR our 6-month progress report and year 1 finance return, and we are just about to submit our data access management plan. The focus for the past few months has been baseline measures and intelligence gathering. So mapping the existing infrastructure and partnerships across the workstream areas. So mapping our different partnerships, mapping existing structures for public involvement and how we can build on those, and looking at the current culture and infrastructure and skills across the council in relation to research. There is an insight piece currently happening, led by one of our University of Birmingham collaborators, Jason Lowther, who's looking at who's carrying out interviews with senior leaders and managers within the council to look at to what extent is research seen as something integral to decision making and practice, and how confident and capable do people feel about being able to use research effectively, and what is their interest. So, is research seen as essential or a nice to have, and what do we need to really embed that evidence-informed approach? And that's going to be built on for a more council-wide research needs analysis. And we're also connecting with other HDRCs and regional partners to understand current activity, good practice, what the opportunities are to link up, and also some of the issues and barriers that others have faced. And we've learned so much from talking to other HDRCs. It's been such a valuable experience. And we've also been making links into existing programmes and partnerships, which we did actually do through developing the bid, but now it's more about the practical things to make that happen now that we have the team in place to be able to progress that work. So the Levelling Up programme, the HDRC has a role in supporting needs assessment, evaluation, and also monitoring the impacts of the programme. So the Levelling Up programme is like a defined context for intervention on the wider determinants, because the idea is that it's improving Sandwell as a place, and it gives us that defined context for the HDRC. So we're making it's not just abstract concepts, we're testing this out in real time. Sandwell Child Friendly Borough, as you've already heard about from Tracy, and there's a role for us to support community participation and evidence-informed practice. We have a number of research projects and bids underway with academic partners, and Sue Frossell and I attended the West Midlands ADPH network with a combined authority colleague, where we discussed the potential for having a Midlands research network that will link with the Midlands Intelligence Network. And we've also been attending those national HDRC meetings and events, so we've been busy fostering those connections. And last but not least, communication. Oh, I've just been given a timing warning. Can't chair myself, unfortunately. Thanks, Jane. So communication and engagement. So we are developing our website and social media content. We had some targeted briefings for voluntary organisations, which we held in March, which gave us a gauge for who may be interested in supporting and taking this work forward with us. And to help build upon for when we, as we develop that plan for more detailed engagement. We have a launch event for wider stakeholders in November, and we are planning a roadshow we're planning a roadshow in the new year, where the focus will be very much on engaging local communities and getting their views on what we need to be focusing on. And we're also developing a newsletter and internal information sessions. So just really to summarise, what we're doing at the moment is very much, it's more the internally focused elements for for linking in with existing partnerships and making sure that the HDRC sort of fits in with other programmes across the council, where we can avoid duplicating existing activity. And also, when we do go out externally, we don't want to be asking people the same things. So thank you for listening, and I won't take questions now because I'm going to invite Sonia, Dr. Sonia Busu from the University of Birmingham, to talk about some of the methods that she's been using for community participation. So I will hand over to Sonia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lina, for inviting me, and thanks everyone for the fantastic presentation and discussion this morning. What I'm going to do is tell you a bit about some creative arts-based methods of participation that I've been using in my recent work on youth participation. And next slide, please. So these two, in particular, I'm going to refer to two projects. Mindset Revolution, which was a project on youth participation on youth mental health that started in Manchester, but is developing into an international collaboration between young people in Manchester and Barcelona. And it was supposed to be a small project, but it has become a process that is increasingly led by the young people. And a lot of the methods and the learning that came out of this project is inspiring a new project funded by Horizon Europe on creating intersectional spaces of participation, so more inclusive participatory democracy. And part of the work under Inspire will happen in the West Midlands Combined Authority. And so I hope that you can all be involved in different ways. So next slide, please. I worked with a partnership. I've been working with a partnership of academics and local charities in Greater Manchester, and 23 young people between 16 and 25-year-olds who were recruited through grassroots groups and local universities. And we used a participatory democracy practice called legislative theatre to explore mental health policy and practice from young people's perspective. So this is a very inclusive way to center young people's views and really enabling them to reframe the narrative and the problem. And legislative theatre builds on Augusto Boal's method of forum theatre and applies it to the political system with the aim to achieve social justice. Next slide. So how did it work? Young people, with the help of practitioners, so we partnered with Katie Rubin, who is an expert in legislative theatre. And then under Mindset Revolution, we also trained some young people as legislative theatre facilitators themselves. And so they're now working with different partners on different projects, but also with local authorities across the UK. Young people developed their own plays to reflect on and share their collective experience of navigating mental health support and systemic discriminations in educational settings, in the health system and wider society. We worked with a very diverse group, and so the issue of intersectional exclusion emerged strongly throughout the process. And so this became really a crucial opportunity to explore perspectives that are often overlooked in research and policy on youth mental health. And next slide. Our most recent play, Mask to Break, looks at how young people struggle within the health, navigating the mental health system. In particular, the main character is struggling to get a diagnosis of ADHD and is labeled as lazy at school by teachers that do not have time and resources to engage with all their pupils' problems. Working class parents from ethnic background, working 2 jobs to manage rising living costs, feel humiliated by the school who accuses them of neglecting their responsibilities. And so isolated at school and at home, the main character is passed around different services, and each placing a new label on the protagonist. And this happens literally in the play. So the protagonist keeps going in circles from the GP to children's services to A&E, back to the GP. And at the end, they're told, and I'm quoting one of the lines, oh, well, you're going to be 18 next month. Happy birthday. Now you have to go through adult services, but the waiting list is even longer. But next slide, please. But legislative theatre plays are not stories of helpless people. And legislative theatre is really about agency. So the protagonist of our legislative theatre play work to challenge the systemic barriers they face, and they seek allies. And so during the performance, an audience of community members, the friends and family of the actors, but beyond as well, and policymakers as well, they play a crucial role, not as spectators, but as spect actors. And so the stage itself becomes a democratic space of deliberative dialogues. And next slide. So following the play, the audience, members of the audience and policymakers improvise with the scene. They literally enter the scene to identify problems and explore with the actors solutions by changing the scenes and the characters' behaviors. And so for each performance, we put together also a policy team of commissioners, professionals, first sector practitioners and other relevant stakeholders. And these policy teams were invited to commit to implementing feasible action to help realize the policy proposals that were co-created by the actors and the audience. And at the end, everyone votes also to prioritize the proposals that are most important or urgent. And so next slides. So we also used our civic tech platform for digital participation called Decidim. Decidim in Catalan means we decide. And with this platform, we wanted to broaden participation beyond the young people directly involved in the project, creating also a safe space where young people could discuss issues and share resources in between in-person sessions. And so this was also a space where the young people facilitated themselves in dialogue with some sympathetic policymakers. And the digital space itself was co-designed with the young people. And a crucial aspect of our approach was really an emphasis on what we called participatory scrutiny. So the Decidim platform includes an accountability function that helps monitor progress. And so accountability becomes a very visible process, and the actions are clearly linked to specific organizations that have committed to implementation. Progress can be traced over time. Policymaking is complex and follow-up is complex, and we're now applying for more funding to also use legislative theatre to explore barriers to implementation with policymakers and young people working together to create a play. But we're also developing a module on this Decidim platform that follows a legislative theatre process, and this will be tested also as part of my new project, Inspire, of which I'm going to tell you in a minute. Next slide. And as part of this whole work, we also embedded a participatory evaluation where the young people themselves used a range of, with our support, they used a range of creative methods, from blog posts to podcast conversations to poetry or drawings, and to help them evaluate their experience of participating in this process and really think about what worked for them and what didn't. And also it was an opportunity for them to reflect on their own perceived social impact. And this reflection then fed into a playbook co-authored by the young people. And so this work is developing now through new project and collaboration with different partners taking the lead on a range of projects. So a partner based in Spain is funding a school of democracy. And so some of the young people that worked with us in Mindset Revolution are facilitating webinars with other young people from other European cities on using legislative theatre or civic tech platform as tools for youth activism. And next slide. So this brings me to my last slide. which is really about the INSPIRE project, where we test a lot of these approaches and we develop them with participants and across a range of different contexts, including the West Midlands. So this is a project of which I am scientific coordinator, and it includes 17 partners across Europe. And the focus is how to strengthen participation of citizens in policymaking that is inclusive and impactful. And as part of this project, we plan a series of co-design participatory processes with groups that tend to participate less, and so whose views and experiences are often marginalized in policymaking, from migrant women to people with disabilities, war refugees, diverse young people. So in the West Midlands Combined Authority, we're partnering with the Youth Combined Authority, starting from their priorities. And then we're gonna recruit more young people more widely across the region to be part of a legislative theatre process and other activities and co-design them with them. And we always also pay the participants involved. For the INSPIRE project in the West Midlands, we'll be working with slightly younger participants between 14 and 18. And so partnering closely with youth organizations to also implement their safeguarding measures and risk assessment. And really what we want to do is to reimagine what intersectional democratic spaces can look like by co-designing them with the participants. And we're going to experiment with a range of arts-based and creative methods to bring really fun and creativity into political participation. And what we want to recognize is that democracy is relational, and empathy and human connections are crucial to create and nurture spaces of dialogue and mutual trust. And so in the West Midlands, we're using legislative theatre, but in other countries will be testing also performance lectures, living labs, and different forms of play and gamification. And there are opportunities to also share learning through our participatory platform. And so I'll be very happy to discuss with you and also see how we can link better to the work that Lina is leading on in Sandwell. So yeah, I'm gonna finish here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. So I'm Hannah Commenter, and I work with the Research and Innovation Team, Black Country Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust. I am the Community Connections Lead and the Underserved Populations Community Development Worker. So I cover the areas of Sandwell, Wolverhampton, Walsall, and Dudley. And today I'll be highlighting the symposium's aim by addressing some of the challenges that Community Connections faces in our best practice and our best practice regarding collaboration and evaluation in healthcare research, and how co-production may overcome these. So collaboration and evaluation in research, Community Connections, strengthening co-production within Sandwell. Next slide, please. Our thinking and learning outcomes is focused on the challenges and best practices. So you'd hear a lot of that as I go along. We've heard a lot today. What does effective co-production look like? What is collaboration? What is evaluation? What does it look like? And what are our next steps? Next slide, please. So Community Connections, the Black Country Healthcare Research and Innovation Team, we carry out research in various areas like older adults, mental health, learning disability, and Community Connections was set up to engage underserved populations. So Community Connections is a patient and public engagement program that is led by Black Country Healthcare and Birmingham Community Healthcare. Aston University is our key academic partner, and it is funded, the program is funded by the Clinical Research Network. It's now the Research Delivery Network West Midlands. Now, what we do at Community Connections is we build a network
of networks of those who want to partner, collaborate, and tackle health inequalities, enhance the quality of life, and help to impact on the health outcomes of our local communities. So we go into our communities, find out what the priority is, and then we move from there. Now, the challenge that we face is how to engage our communities who have historically been marginalized or find healthcare services inaccessible. So our best practice is we foster trust and engagement by listening. We do a lot of listening. We engage with our local communities. We signpost them to services if that's what's necessary. We might not talk about research. And if we get to that stage where we can carry out research, then we will be looking at co-designing, co-creating, co-producing research projects in collaboration with our communities and stakeholders. Next slide, please. So what is co-production in research? And as many people as possible should please put in the chat your understandings, your perceptions about what co-production is, because it means different things to different people. And there are some links. I think here I will put that in the chat. We also have that at the bottom of some of the slides. And if you want to explore further, you can do that. So co-production, we do have challenges with that. We think about information sharing. Some people talk about information sharing and they think that's co-production. They talk about consultation, but there are power issues there. We know there are benefits of co-production. It enhances trust and transparency. It promotes equitable partnerships, but some of the challenges that we face is the lack of community input in research that has led to solutions that don't meet real world needs. And I remember, I think Lena said that earlier on, real world needs is really important. So our best practice is to use co-production and weave the diverse voices of our communities, their experiences into the research and ensure that solutions are relevant and actionable. Now, co-production shifts research from doing research on communities to doing research with communities. And we also note that a lot of the co-production research is more qualitative, so mixed methods, case studies, and there are small sample sizes, which may lead to recruitment bias. Next slide, please. So why does co-production matter? Co-production addresses inequalities and it makes research more impactful by working alongside communities throughout the process, the research process. Now, a challenge that we face is that underserved populations are often left out of the research processes. So it makes the solutions less effective. And our best practice is co-production, which ensures that the research reflects the unique needs of our underserved groups by incorporating their lived or living experience in all that we do. Co-production is not just a strategy, but it may be a solution to challenges like the exclusion of voices and marginalization. And I remember hearing at a recent webinar, someone said that our communities are not hard to reach, but they are easy to ignore. So a lack of clarity around the definition of co-production, what it means in practice, etc. It's a gray area that it can be an issue about when to involve the stakeholders and public engagements through participation or involvement, and at which step of the research cycle are we involving our lived experience consultants or living experience consultants or patient and public involvement and engagement groups. Next slide, please. Yes, so community connections, how we engage. In the visual, you see community connections at the top, but there's a lot that goes on underneath the surface that you don't see. So we have challenges with community engagement, with understandings of mental health and well-being. And the way we address this is by building trust. So connecting and engaging with trusted voices, listening. We host a lot of listening events. So we'd go out into our communities and host what I call, or we call, the listening tables, sandpit events, focus groups. And the challenges that we face is about identifying, one of the challenges is about identifying the needs of the underserved populations, many of whom may distrust research, or they feel excluded, or they feel exhausted because they think that or experience that we don't go back to them and share our findings. So the best practice is for community connections. We build trust through listening. Sometimes we signpost to other services because research is not important at that minute or at that moment. And then we co-create, we co-design solutions with community members, depending on what matters most. We also facilitate research, or we'll facilitate so that our communities, our local communities, especially our underserved populations, can have a taster of what being part of a research project is. Next slide, please. Strengthening the research culture. To address the challenges of building a community-led research culture and ensure that the diverse voices are heard and research is more inclusive, we involve our communities, our stakeholders, our partners, so it can be voluntary sector, social enterprises, faith-based organizations. We involve them in the process. So our planning, our co-designing, co-creating, evaluation, reflection, we always reflect on what we are doing so that we can do better. And then we go back to planning. And some of the challenges we face include the research culture, which often excludes the community input and is driven by institutional priorities. So our best practice is to co-production to promote a culture where community voices are central to decision making. And as illustrated, some of the tools we use are collaboration, building trust, learning from each other, sustainability, that's a big issue, and then evaluation. Next slide, please. So why evaluation? A lot of you will know that evaluation enhances research relevance and impact. It improves the research design methods, methodologies. It ensures accountability. And some of the projects that we are working on include the Community Connections Community Health Co-Production Forum, and I'll talk about it very soon. We're also in the public advisory group of the University of Warwick's FACT study that's facilitating bystander cardiopulmonary resuscitation training. And then we are also a member of the independent advisory group of the National Institute for Health and Care Research, First Fresh group. Now, the challenges that we experience include how to measure impact in a way that reflects the diverse community needs and ensuring inclusivity in evaluation methods while addressing barriers like stigma and language. And the best practice is for us to use flexible methods, being flexible in our approach. I remember as Dr. Divers, the first speaker, he talked about working out of hours, so being flexible and using community-driven evaluation methods that incorporate feedback loops and qualitative data from lived experience. Next slide, please. So the success story. I'll give you some background to this, where we identified the top 3 mental health priorities across Black countries. So this event happened in March this year, the Community Connections Community Health Co-Production Forum. The background was, since Community Connections started in the Black country, we have a lot of our local communities, our colleagues in the NHS Trust, academics asking us, what are you identifying as the top mental health priority in the Black country, and what's being done to support or solve this issue or problem? So together with our operational group and certain stakeholders, we decided to organize this event where we had 60 delegates, including the organizers. We used volunteer and snowball sampling. The research design was mixed methods. And with our evaluation, we used a survey questionnaire. We had 37 returned hard copy versions and 1 online. And it was quite interesting. So if you look at the question that says, which aspect of the event do you feel you or your team may benefit most from in the future? Some of the words that came up were networking time, co-production, and engagement, continuous engagement. And all these weave around collaboration, co-production, so we can see how important it is to our communities. And just to let you know, so we have submitted the manuscripts that we have written together with our local communities, and keep your eyes open. We will be telling you soon and sharing that with you. Next slide, please. So acknowledgements, thank you very much to all those our partners who were part of the event in March, the co-production forum. There are lots more, we couldn't put all the names there, but it's important for us to make sure that the voices, perspectives of our local communities, our stakeholders are heard in our research. And also the challenge here is, in terms of future directions, is how to keep improving the research culture and continuing co-production efforts. So our best practice is continuing to engage the next generation in co-production, making it easy to speak about the research culture, collaboration, evaluation, what changes, and addressing these challenges in co-production and evaluation as it may lead to sustainable community-driven research outcomes. So next slide, please. I'd like to encourage everyone, all delegates to this symposium, to apply co-production and community engagement methods to your own work. And I'm going to share a poem, These Voices. It's a reflection of inequality and adversity faced by our underserved communities and the importance of hearing these voices in research. Again, there are challenges and best practice. And I'll turn off my camera to read this. These voices. I am soaring above all these voices that prevent me from being me. I am, yes, I am what I am designed to be. I speak the way I speak because that is who I am. I am committed to make a change, and I work the way I work because that is my understanding of it in the noun. How you see me, how you belittle me, how you make me seem and appear to be dumb just because I smile does not prevent me from excelling and exceeding and surpassing who I am today. I aspire to be. I aspire to be. I aspire to be and will be. I look beyond the noun. I look beyond what stops me, what prevents me, what makes me unable to move. And I see into the future. I see and hear what I can become. I see and hear what the future generations after me can become, and I set forth the path. I set the pavement stones in place. Yes, I am and will be. So next slide, please. So thank you very much. These are our contact details. We've also got our colleagues in Birmingham. So if you want to contact them, just get in touch. I think the Director of Research and Innovation, Chris, is in our meeting. And if there are any questions, please put them in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thousands of projects, thousands of reports, peer-reviewed papers, where one of the most common things that we see is that in the limitations is where diversity and inclusion is talked about. And that's a real shame, because what it says is this research is limited by the people who took part in it. And by reference then, the outputs, the usability, the appropriateness and the usefulness of what we find is also then restricted, because we cannot make an assumption that if we produce research that talks to or that is informed by one group in our society, that it can actually have that effective application elsewhere or globally. Next slide, please. So that actually brings us to the point about the research culture. And in my presentation, I want to talk about it from two elements, really. I want to talk about it from the teams and the groups of people who engage with research, whether they are as participants or they are as researchers or research leads, but also in relation to how we do our research, the methodologies, the approaches and the methods that we use to get that information. Within research teams and research organisations, we spend a lot of time and effort trying to attract the right people with the right qualifications, the right backgrounds, the right insights to form our research. We spend time and effort to ensure that those people can actually do the work that we would need them to do. And we also spend time empowering them, either financially, with time or with support, to get the research done. So the focus so the kind of cultures we create in our research efforts are about how we attract the right people, how we ensure they have the skills, opportunities, and what they need to do the research, and how we empower them to actually get the research done. And all that requires us to be both inclusive and to be collaborative. Next slide, please. When we think about the culture we're trying to create, it's really important that we actually take a step back and think about who and why, or how do we inform the culture. And that's really what the essence of this presentation is about. Not just what should we do, but how do we actually do it. Now, when we think about diversity, equity and inclusion, I think this quote from Lenson and et al., even though it's from 2012, still for me helps us to highlight why we need to think about inclusion and inclusive practice, as well as collaboration for research purposes. They say that as professions, and that's not, although they were talking around healthcare professions, I think it actually applies beyond healthcare, but certainly to the professional pursuits of researchers in healthcare particularly. Professions are constituted through their specific ways of engaging with knowledge. And as researchers, we can value that. We know that we engage with knowledge from the past or how things have been done to help us think about how does this apply to projects we do now, and how could it be adapted, how could it be perfected or improved for the future. If you click again, please, for me, Kira. So ultimately what they're talking about is that as professions, and in this case as research professionals or research focused professionals, how we develop and how we are constituted, how our culture is made up, depends on how we know what we know and how we use it. And in this specific case, it's about how do we know about inclusion as it affects research or as it's embedded in our research, and how do we use our knowledge of inclusion and collaboration to develop our projects, to guide how we do our research, and to inform the cultures in which people are able to do their work well. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, from my experience, a lot of times, both in the act of doing research and in the way we write up research or the way we disseminate it, we think about inclusion within the restricted barriers of protected characteristics. Now, I'm not saying that protected characteristics are not important, but because they provide a very important framework for us to think about and to review who is part of our study, who is part of our team producing the studies that we are conducting, and who do we need to include or collaborate with. So they give us a framework for us to measure or test how inclusive we are in what we do, who we include, and how we go about it. However, often our efforts to be inclusive in our research practice don't go any further than identifying protected characteristics. But rather than being the starting point to our inclusive cultures, they actually end up being the end point. And as I mentioned earlier on, usually they are, by the time we get to writing the paper or making the recommendations, they are confined to a short discussion on limitations, and we focus on who we didn't include in the work that we do. Next slide, please. The problem that we have is that when we go to develop our research culture around inclusion and collaboration, it means that we often have to engage in conversations about knowledge or know-how of inclusion that can make us feel quite vulnerable. Often we feel confident in the spaces where we either have some commonality of identity or we have experience. But talking about things where we have less experience, and particularly work around inclusion sits in these spaces, can make us feel quite vulnerable. And it's risky. We feel it's a risk. Sometimes we feel that it's such a risk that actually we don't have the conversation at all. The question that often resounds in our minds around inclusion in the culture of our research is, if I raise this, what will that say about me? Or what will it expose about me? Will it expose my discomfort with this conversation? Will it expose that despite the fact that I'm a well-renowned researcher and I've got lots of experience in research methods, in research methodologies, or even in this research subject, that I actually don't know quite a lot about this? And in relation to this symposium and the speakers that you've had previously, particularly when we're working in public health, particularly when we're working in research that impacts on people in their everyday life where they live, as opposed to research that's specifically related to inpatient, working in hospital and in quite confined and controlled areas. Inclusion and the diversity of people and the diversity of experiences that we have to take into account for our research to be useful is even more important. Vulnerability in these discussions is always a risk, but what's critical to our research to make it both effective and appropriate is that we actually engage in those conversations. Critical engagement with ourselves and what we know and where we're comfortable and not comfortable, and the context of our research is absolutely key here. In all research that we do, particularly research around public health, particularly research which is inclusive, which has user involvement or community and personal involvement involved, there are three elements in all our work, irrespective of our methods that we choose to use. There is the insight brought in by the participants and the diversity of their experience. There are the contributions and the insight around the subject and the diversity of how that subject, whether it's clinical, whether it's social, whether it's a combination of those things. There's a diversity, a variation in the different parameters that will affect our research. And then there is the final part, which is us as a researcher. All those things, our research team, the subjects we research, and the people involved, in themselves create a diversity of experience that we can only capture or be fully minded as to the impact that has by having an inclusive and a collaborative approach to our research. Next slide, please. Of course, one of the biggest barriers that we face is language. There is many studies where we could look at, and if I look at some of my own early studies, where these particular terms are used interchangeably, even within the same research papers or the same research proposals. You know, when I sat on NIHR funding panels, people who try to be inclusive in the way they do the research use these terms so interchangeably as that it demonstrates we're not quite sure exactly what we mean by them. Diversity, inclusion, equity, and justice, or social justice, are fundamentally part of the research culture that we create. Next slide, please. What we do know from research, and what we do know from working within public health and the world in general, is just because we have diversity, it doesn't mean that we have inclusion or we're inclusive in what we do. So that brings me back to the point about why it's important we don't just stop at projected characteristics. What happens is we may get, on surface, a diverse people in our teams or a diverse participant group, but all diversity is description of that there is a variety of people or perspectives in the room or in the study. It doesn't actually mean that we are inclusive in how we do our research and how we engage with our research. And it doesn't mean that we're necessarily collaborative in how we do our research either. There's a phrase that says diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance and being shown the steps. What happens then? We are in a situation now where the strive to be more diverse in our research teams or our research culture in terms of our approach to research doesn't really give us what we need. We still see a lack of representation in research teams and research studies. We still see poor retention of very diverse talent in our teams because of a lack of inclusion and inclusiveness in how we do our research. And we also see a lack of advancement of diverse talent. Now, I'm thinking around diversity in the broadest sense of the word, across all the protected characteristics, but also in the social context of those characteristics. Now, in relation to studies themselves, the other issue is methodological fit. If we don't have inclusive approach and collaborative approach to our research, it's really common to find that methodological approaches are just repeated study after study after study. And that's quite problematic because no research method, as we know, or research approach is correct in and of itself. Our methodological choices are always contextual, depending on what it is we're studying, what we hope to achieve, and what we're trying to investigate, and how we are hoping to use the outcomes. And yet, we can look at studies where particular study teams use the same methodology over and over and over again, irrespective of community, irrespective of variations in time or even the subject. And the other part, which is usually always noted in limitation, is it results in what we know for sure. We know that without inclusive approaches in our research culture and without a collaborative approach at the heart of what we do, our recruitment is quite ineffective. We don't get a diversity of participants, or we don't get a diversity of even people within our teams. And our dissemination strategies are quite narrowed. They are quite formulaic, if you like, in what we end up with. So despite our best intentions to produce research which has global impact, which is generalizable across our populations, we fail in that space without an inclusive culture and a collaborative approach behind it. Next slide, please. You're all familiar, or hopefully familiar, with this picture, which is often used to describe the difference between the terms equality, equity, and justice. but I find them quite useful to actually describe the differences in research cultures. In the first picture, the research culture here, if you think about it in that sense, the assumption is that everyone benefits from the same support. So what you can have is a very well-established, well-formed, possibly very successful research team or research culture, which goes into inclusion to try to expand and vary the number of and the range of researchers it has and the types of studies that it does. However, the context, the culture in which it operates is fixed. The fence is where the fence is, and the focus is on retaining and maintaining the well-embedded structure. What happens within that culture is you get people in, you get the diversity in, but the outputs, the impact that the research is trying to have is not uniformly evidenced. Some things work well, some things just about get the impact, and some things remain completely not successful in that structure. It's inflexible, it's not collaborative, it's not engaging with the people involved. And it does continue, the match in this case, the game continues to go on, and some people see it, but some people don't. And maybe that culture is okay with that. In the second picture, what you see here is a culture which recognizes actually there is some input here. We do want everybody to see the game, but the input in the culture, in this research culture, is really a deficit one, which says, okay, we'll put some support in for other people, and that works. We get the result, we get the output that we want, and there is some diversity, there's some equity. It's based on understanding what it's trying to achieve and making the adjustments in the face of or in the light of the barriers that are there. The final picture, which is the one that focuses on social justice, works equally alongside equity. And that is where the culture is focused on removing the barriers themselves to collaboration, inclusion. Now, these pictures are not mutually exclusive. It's not a case for me of one being better than the other. They're just different. What they show us, they give a very good barometer, I think, for us to think about the research cultures we're currently in and look to see which one of these is actually the research culture you have. And when you have plans to be more collaborative or more inclusive in your research culture, where are you putting your efforts? Are your efforts focused on retaining the structures you have? Are the efforts focused on keeping the structures but providing the input to the individuals or the groups to allow them to see the match in this case? Or are your efforts based on changing the structure of how things are done, such that there are less barriers in the systems and the processes that you use? Next slide, please. Ultimately, the point I'm making here around how we strengthen the inclusiveness and the collaboration of the research environment is that we need to move beyond just looking at the protected characteristics as our start and finish point. As Audrey Lord here, in the real world where we live, it's not a single issue struggle. We can't focus on just single issues, if you like, even 13 of them in parallel, because life is a little more complicated than that. And people do not live lives in that way. And as we are researchers in public health, researchers in community, it's even more important. Next slide, please. So how do we, or could we, nurture cultural excellence in the research environment in this learning space? These two pictures show two different ways. Often our research cultures work in the way of the picture on the top. We build capacity and capability, and we build our research excellence by one leading people up the same path that we have been on. But the second one identifies much more of an inclusive and collaborative way, where we can see the beam of light that we focus on, but we create a culture that allows us to support and provide a wider space for people to work. So they don't have to respond or follow the path that we've done, but we create a space where actually the systems, the processes, the way we do our work allows people to work from their point of view, but within a range of opportunities that we have. Next slide, please. So what would an inclusive or collaborative research culture give us? And there is evidence to support all of these things. Being more collaborative and inclusive in the culture that we have improves our research designs and methodology. It allows us to get critical comment and reflection on what we do and how we do it from a broad range of people. Our research questions are more likely to be more relevant to a broader part of the community, to wider areas of experience that we may not have considered, which in turn increases the accuracy of our data and reflecting what happens in the real world. And then on the flip side, how more easy it is for us to generalize our findings and our recommendations to a broader community or population. It also promotes ethical research practices because we're able to think about how our research ethics and what we're going to do will impact different communities or different people or have different opportunities or different consequences in different spaces. And it also reduces our risk of slipping into methodological bias, where we stick with the methodology that we're happy and we're comfortable with, rather than the one that actually has the best fit in this particular context. And that in itself strengthens our use of, or our confidence in using cross-cultural methodological approaches and mixing the methods that we use and the approaches we use so that the studies have the best chance of being effective and appropriate. And that again aligns with leveraging diverse analytical approaches too. And all these things are likely to improve stakeholder engagement and confidence in what we're doing, and their recognition that when we're doing research, we actually see who we're talking to. And we're not just working it from our own academic or clinical professional view of how research should be done. And that in itself makes it easier for us to disseminate our work and think about much broader dissemination and the impact of what we're actually doing. Next slide, please. Ultimately, our research is about changing practice. And this from the Wanless report, even 20 years ago, for me, is something that's driven my research and my work as a clinical academic. Research that can't answer the so what question and the why question, we know is nothing more than, you could say, just academics doing what academics do. If our research is truly focused on professional practice, and that is providing the evidence to underpin the science and the art of promoting health, preventing disease, and prolonging life, then we need to do that through organised effects in society. That's by getting together. And as the slide said right at the beginning of this presentation, this requires the input of a diverse range of people from the community or from our world. A diversity and an inclusive approach, both within research teams and cultures, as well as within the people and the communities we invite to take part in our research. Next slide, please. So that's all I was going to share with you today. Inclusion and effectiveness in our research and collaboration is wholly dependent on us developing those inclusive and collaborative cultures. Without that, we will continue to produce highly effective research, which is only impactful on some of our community. Thank you.
I'm Kate Fryer and I lead the Deep End Research Alliance, which is based in the Primary Care Research Group at the University of Sheffield. And I'm going to describe today our IBISUS model of community co-development. Next slide, please. So just a bit about who we are. We are a tripartite partnership of academics, patients and clinicians working in primary care research. And the Deep End is a well-known kind of international and national concept about the fact that the people most in need of good quality healthcare are the people least likely to get it. And the role of the Deep End Research Alliance is to address the role of health and academic institutions and processes in perpetuating inequality in health research, as this further feeds into health inequalities. Next slide, please. So we know that people from ethnic minority backgrounds have poorer health and poorer experiences of using health services. We also know that participation bias in research leads to a lack of good quality data, which, as I said before, feeds into this health inequality. We also know that traditionally academic communities have been very white. And so Ray talks about this thing called methodological whiteness, where that kind of gets baked into the way research is done because that's the way it's always been done. And there's also a failure to understand the wider context. So research doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in a society and in a place where there is both historical and current and local and international factors, which might affect the decisions that people are making of whether or not to take part in research. Next slide, please. So given what we knew and given we know about this underrepresentation in research and that traditional methods of research aren't accessible enough to people from the kind of communities that we wanted to engage with, we iteratively developed a model of community engagement with community partners with a community research link worker role at the heart of it. When I say iteratively, I have to say we really didn't know what we were doing at the beginning, and it was very much kind of working with the communities that led to the development of this. So what I'm describing here kind of happened over 5 primary healthcare projects, which had a total of 144 participants. I'm using participants to include both people who engaged as research participants and also attended PPI events, so participants in a loose sense in this case. And the community research link workers, who I'll talk a little bit about later, utilised their community networks to recruit participants. They facilitated focus groups, they assisted with analysis, and they co-presented at dissemination events. Next slide, please. So I'm going to describe the 6 stages of the model, but I'm going to use a specific example of one of our community groups so I can illustrate this as we go along. So we work with a variety of different community groups who represent a variety of different communities around Sheffield. I'm going to use the example of the Sheffield African Caribbean Mental Health Association here. So the first step in the process is to identify key people and organisations representing the local ethnic minority communities that you want to engage with because you understand that your research has important implications to that group. And I think I first came across SACMA simply by Googling them and contacting them. And when I first contacted them, the reception I got from them was fairly frosty, and that was because of their previous experiences of research and specifically with the University of Sheffield. And it made me realise that we as in terms of our kind of reputation with local communities, it wasn't good and it needed to be repaired. So we weren't even starting from a neutral position, we were starting from a kind of negative position. Next slide, please. So that naturally entailed that relationships needed to be built and we needed to establish trust. And this was done over a period of time. So the great thing about SACMA was, despite their previous negative experiences, they were willing to keep having the conversation. So I spoke to several members of staff. This was kind of in COVID time. So once things opened back up again, I was able to go and visit them. And I attended a few of their events where I was just kind of there. I wasn't trying to get anything in particular from that visit. I was just kind of being there and seeing how they worked. After a little while of this, we had established enough of a relationship to put on a couple of very small joint events. So one of those was an online webinar where we looked at various research scandals that had affected the African Caribbean community. And we had Katie Biggs from the Clinical Trials Unit in Sheffield, who explained how laws had been changed because of those things that had happened And it was a really good opportunity to kind of air some of those things that are often there in the background but don't get talked about openly enough. Next slide, please. So by this time, we were in a pretty good position, you know, in terms of our relationship with SACMA, and Dr. Chi Huang, who is a prostate cancer researcher, had a project that she wanted to do, and because she knew that prostate cancer was more common in Black men than in the general population, she really wanted to work with Black men on that. So we approached SACMA and we asked them to identify what we call community research link workers. So these are people sort of embedded in their communities that we can give training to, so that they can be part of the academic team, but also form a kind of a bridge between the project team and the community. We were very fortunate to get Sheila and Val, who are a retired nurse and a retired health visitor. So not only were they embedded in the community, but they had loads of relevant experience to bring to the role. Next slide, please. So after giving them training both in the background to the research and the specific things that they would need to do. So that included kind of talking to people about the research, recruiting them to come along to some engagement sessions, and then facilitating those sessions. And then we support the community research link workers throughout the study. So they really take a lead, but there's always the academic researcher kind of in the background to provide any help that's needed, which in this case was very little help at all. And this photo is of Val facilitating a group with Chi in the background. Next slide, please. We then evaluate and co-produce the next steps with the community research link workers. And you can see us sat around a table here with lots of post-it notes, which is sort of how we went about it. And this was actually a patient and public involvement session, but when we do this in a research project, we would also involve the community research link workers in the analysis process, because they have a really important lens through which to see the findings. Next slide, please. And incredibly important is to share the outcomes of the study with the community. And such a lot of what we heard from SACMA and other community groups in the beginning was, and it's been mentioned on this call already, is that researchers come in, they take what they want, they go away again, and nobody sees any change at all. So it's really important to feed that back to the community. We use visual scribes at a lot of our events who produce little pictures like this one you can see at the bottom of the slide. And we find this a really good way of getting a very kind of community friendly output that can be distributed quite quickly. Sheila and Val went with, along with Chi to the first ever Black in Cancer conference in London with a poster about this project, and they just absolutely loved that. They had a brilliant time and they found it so inspiring, and they had the longest queue for their poster out of all of them, so they were really delighted by that. Another really important outcome of this was that we then supported Sheila and others to set up the 1 in 4 prostate cancer support group, which is the first prostate cancer support group for men in the north of England, as far as we know. And this was also really important because, again, it's been mentioned before, you know, academic time is so long, it can take such a long time to get from a small scale study to something further down the line where you actually see the patient benefit. But this was an immediate outcome for the community, and I think that's really, really important, because it's got to be a reciprocal two-way relationship. It can't be just us going in and taking things all the time, and I think this really helped with that. That group was set up, as you can see, kind of about a year and a half ago now, and it's still going strong and developing, which is great. Next slide, please. So this is the 6 steps as one, and as I said, we weren't clear that these were the steps when we started, but looking back over the process, we were able to establish that this is what we had done, and felt that this was something that we could learn from, you know, in engaging with new communities, and perhaps other people could as well. Next slide, please. So the impact of the IBIS's model for us has been increased engagement by people from ethnic minority and socioeconomically deprived communities compared to our previous methods of engagement that we'd tried. It results in studies designed by and for what we call deep end populations. So these engagement activities and the smaller scale qualitative studies are starting to lead to better designed, larger studies that are further along the path to patient benefit. And we feel we're on a trajectory to truly citizen-led research. We now have one project about diabetes just starting, which is being co-led by me and David Basu, who's in this picture, who's the service lead at SACMA. What we want to do is give more control of the whole research agenda over to communities, and the way to do that obviously is with money. And I should have mentioned actually the Community Research Link Worker role is a paid role, and we make sure that we pay for all of the community engagement that we do. But in this case, SACMA are actually holding a large part of the budget, which I think really helps kind of shift the power. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, we think this is a model which can be applied flexibly across and beyond primary care. It provides a roadmap to reaching the higher levels of citizen power in research. So going further than that consultation and informing, which is valuable, but perhaps kind of not enough, to actually putting the research agenda into the control of the people who are ultimately going to be affected by the research. And it needs to be executed flexibly with an understanding of local needs. Next slide, please. So yeah, that's all from me. There's just a few acknowledgements there, the most important of which is to acknowledge the community partners and the community research link workers who've just absolutely transformed the way that we've done research here in Sheffield, and we're starting now to use that method with other universities around the country as well. So thank you very much.
So I would just like to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to all our speakers for your excellent presentations. You've done such a fantastic job of bringing this to life, and also a huge shout out to Jane and Kira for all their hard work to organise this day and get such a fantastically varied agenda together. It's been such an interesting day, and it's absolutely flown by, and not just because of the timing issues. You know, it's been such a good day, and I feel I've learnt so much, and I hope that everyone else is too. And once again, apologies for the timings being you know, a bit shaken up, but you know, I hope that you've got something out of today. And if you would like to leave us some feedback, please do. You know, please do give your feedback with the there's a QR code there for you to scan and to let us know. Obviously, I think we know how we can improve for next year, certainly in terms of timing. But yes, a big well done to Jane and Kira for you know, because they've actually been you know, while I've been chairing, they've been going behind the scenes, rearranging things, contacting speakers. You know, they've really managed this, I think, really well. So thank you, and thank you to all of you who've come here today, given up your time to come and engage and to learn more. It's been a genuine pleasure today, so thank you all so much for being part of it.